Austin warned us about Vince McMahon, but nobody listened. For years, we watched it happen right in front of us. A tough man in black boots stood up to his evil boss every single week, and we cheered, we laughed, we bought the shirts. We thought it was just a show. We thought the bad boss was just a character, a bit of fun, a cartoon villain made for television. But looking back now, it feels like something much darker was being shown to us the whole time. It feels like a warning, and we missed it. Let me be fair before we go any further. The Steve Austin and Vince McMahon feud was one of the biggest and most exciting stories in wrestling history. It helped build the whole Attitude Era. It turned Austin into a megastar. It turned Vince into one of the most famous villains in sports entertainment. Millions of people loved it. So this is not me saying the story was bad. The story was brilliant. But the truth hiding inside it was not entertainment at all. It was a real power problem. Austin was fighting a boss who wanted to control his body, his image, his career, and his voice. So if you think Austin was seeing something the rest of us missed, give this video some hype. Tap that hype button and send it some love. And let us go back to where the warning first started. Because to understand why Austin's warning mattered so much, we have to go back to a time before he was stone cold. We have to go back to when he was just another worker learning a hard lesson about trust. Before he was the bald, angry, beer-drinking rebel, he was known as Stunning Steve Austin. He worked in a company called World Championship Wrestling. He had real talent. He had success too. He teamed up with a man named Brian Pillman, and together they were called the Hollywood Blondes. They were a sharp, cocky tag team, and they were good at their job. He also worked with a manager named Paul E. Dangerously as part of a group called the Dangerous Alliance. Austin was building a name. He was useful to the company. He was doing everything right. Then in 1995, everything changed. Austin got hurt. He had a triceps injury, picked up while working on a tour in Japan. He was recovering. He was healing. And while he was hurt and stuck at home, the company decided they did not want him anymore. A man named Eric Bischoff, who was a vice president there, made the call. But Austin was not given a phone call. He was not given a meeting. He was not even given the respect of being told to his face. He was fired by FedEx. A letter arrived. That was it. The reason given was that he was unmarketable. In other words, they did not think they could sell him. Think about how cold that is. You give a company your body. You get hurt doing the job. And while you are lying there in pain, they post you a letter to tell you that you are done. No income, no safety net, no kindness, just a delivery and a goodbye. That moment taught Austin a lesson he would never forget. It showed him how cold wrestling management could be. You could be useful one day and thrown away the next. The company did not care about the person. The company cared about the product. And that word they used, unmarketable, is worth stopping on. It is a business word. It does not say bad person, or bad worker, or even bad wrestler. It says we cannot sell you. It treats a human being like a product on a shelf. If you do not sell, you go. That is the cold heart of it. To the people at the top, Austin was not a man recovering from an injury he got for them. He was a line on a page that no longer made enough money. That is the kind of thinking that Austin would spend the rest of his career fighting against. He had felt, in the most personal way, what it was like to be seen as a thing instead of a person. But the story did not end there. A man named Paul Heyman reached out to him. Heyman ran a smaller, wilder company called Extreme Championship Wrestling, or ECW. Heyman had managed Austin before, and now he gave him a chance. He invited Austin to come on his television and speak. He let him air his anger. He let him say what he really felt. And that was the spark. For the first time, Austin was not playing a clean, polite version of himself. He was raw. He was real. He was unscripted. ECW let Austin speak with anger and freedom. That brief run was the place where Austin found the voice that would later become Stone Cold. The anger you saw later was not made up by a writer. It was earned. It came from being treated like nothing. Think about what that brief run really did to him. Before, he had been the company's idea of a wrestler. Clean, safe, built to be sold. Now he was something else. He was a man who had been thrown away and lived to tell the tale. He had nothing left to lose. And that is a dangerous thing for a worker to feel. When you stop being scared of the boss loses his biggest weapon over you. ECW gave Austin that gift without meaning to. It gave him his anger, and it gave him his honesty. So when Austin finally arrived in Vince McMahon's company, the World Wrestling Federation, he already carried that wound. He already knew not to trust the people in charge. He already knew that a worker could be useful one day and bend the next. That distrust did not come from nowhere. He had lived it. He had felt the cold letter in his hands. He had sat at home with no money, while the company that hurt him moved on without a second thought. Most workers carry that kind of memory quietly. Austin carried it like a fire. And right away, the new company tried to shape him into something fake. When Austin debuted in late 1995, Vince's company gave him a character called the Ringmaster. It was dull. It was clean. It was technical. It had no fire and no edge. They gave him a manager named Ted DiBiase to do his talking. Austin knew straight away that it was weak. He knew it would never connect. He had already learned that the people at the top did not always understand what made a star, so he took matters into his own hands. He shaved his head bald. He took the idea from the look of an actor he liked in a film. He grew a goatee to look more mean, more dangerous. He started to build something that felt felt like him, not something handed to him by a meeting room full of suits. And here is a small but important detail. DiBiase quietly told Austin to ignore the creative advice from the production team and just be patient. Even a man inside the system was warning him that the bosses did not really get it. That warning stuck. It made Austin believe even more that the people in charge lacked real insight into who he should be. The company kept trying to give him silly names. One of the names they offered was Fang McFrost. Imagine that. One of the toughest men in wrestling history was nearly called Fang McFrost by the creative team. Austin said no. He rejected the bad names. And then the real name came from somewhere far more human. His wife made a comment about a cup of tea going stone cold. And that was it. Stone Cold. The name that would shake the whole industry came from a cup of tea, not from a corporate plan. Austin built the character himself, piece by piece, rooted in self-reliance and a refusal to be controlled. This is the first big theme of the whole story. Austin became dangerous because he refused to let the company own his identity. He would not be molded. He would not be changed into something fake just because a boss wanted it. And that refusal is exactly what made people love him. Then came his big break, and it almost did not happen the way it did. There was an event called King of the Ring in 1996. Austin was not even the first choice to win it, but there had been an incident. A man named Triple H had been involved in something called the curtain call, where wrestlers broke the rules of the show, and he was punished for it. That punishment opened a door. Austin was put in as the replacement winner. He won King of the Ring, and then he cut a promo that changed everything. The famous Austin 316 promo. In one short speech, the worker the company almost wasted became the face of a brand new era. The man they nearly named Fang McFrost was now the biggest thing in the building. From there, he was on a path that would smash him straight into the corporate machine, and that machine had a face. That face belonged to Vince McMahon. There is something almost poetic about how it all came together. The company nearly buried him with a silly name and a dull character. The system almost wasted it, but the worker they nearly threw away built himself back up with his own two hands, and then became the very thing that the company could not control. The man they could not sell turned out to be the man who would sell more than anyone, and the reason he connected was simple. He felt real. He felt like one of us. He had been hurt by the bosses, just like normal people get hurt by theirs, and now he was fighting back for all of us. For years, Vince had just been a commentator on the show, a calm voice describing the action. But that changed. The character of Mr. McMahon, the evil boss, grew out of a real event in 1997 called the Montreal Screwjob. Producers later called the whole feud a happy accident. It was not fully planned, it just happened, and it caught fire. Fans saw it as the perfect fantasy, a boss against a worker, the little guy against the man at the top. Everyone has had a bad boss, so everyone understood it. Austin gave Vince the first Stone Cold Stunner on Raw, his finishing move, slamming the boss down to the mat, and from there the feud blurred the line between real life and fiction. Vince became the tyrant boss on television. Austin became the worker who would not bow down. And the more you look at it, the more you see that the show was not really making things up. It was showing the truth in plain sight. There is one moment that says it all. Vince once gave Austin a smart corporate suit. He tried to make the rebel look clean and proper, like a good company man. Austin played along for a moment. He put it on, and then he tore it off, hit Vince in the gut, and made his point clear. He would not be molded. He would not be changed. It was treated as a fun television moment. Fans laughed and cheered, but the real message was as clear as day. A boss with too much power will not just ask you to work. He will try to own who you are. He will try to decide how you look, how you speak, and what you become. Notice how small and simple that suit was, and how much it meant. A suit is just clothes. But in that moment, it stood for something much bigger. It stood for the company trying to dress you up as their idea of you. It stood for being made to look like everyone else, polished and quiet and obedient. Austin tearing it off was not just a wrestler doing a fun bit. It was a worker saying, "You do not get to decide who I am. You can pay me, you can book me, but you cannot have my soul." That is why the crowd loved it so much. Deep down, everyone watching knew the feeling of being asked to become something they were not, just to keep a job. That was the first big warning scene, and the warnings kept coming, over and over, in different shapes. The feud was full of control, humiliation, and raw power. Vince was hell-bent on making Austin's life as hard as possible. He used every tool he had. Staged arrests, where Austin was hauled off as if by real police. Corrupt referees who were in the boss's pocket. Ambushes, where Austin was jumped and beaten. Vince was trying to break the worker's spirit, and Austin would warn him, then strike back. You can see this in the actual feud. On the 20th of April in 1998, on an episode of Raw, Austin stood in the ring and warned Vince and a man called Dude Love that he was coming for them. Then he attacked them both, just as he said he would. He told the truth, and then he backed it up. Again on the 22nd of March in 2001, on an episode of SmackDown, Austin gave Vince direct physical warnings before they briefly joined forces. The message was always the same. When you deal with a boss who lies and controls, you have to stay sharp at all times. You can never relax. But this control was not just aimed at Austin. The company showed the same ugly pattern with others too. Think about the Kiss My Ass Club. On screen, screen, wrestlers were forced to bend down and kiss the boss's backside on live television, just to keep their jobs. It was sold as comedy. It was sold as villain behavior, a funny bit of nastiness. But look at what it really was. It was public humiliation. It was workers being made to bow and beg in front of millions, to prove they would do anything to stay employed. It made degrading people feel normal. It made shame look like part of the job. And think about who it was aimed at. It was aimed at people lower down, people who needed the work, people who could not say no. That is the whole point of it. A boss does not make a top star do something like that. He makes the people who are scared do it, the ones who feel they have no choice. And by putting it on television and calling it a laugh, the company taught everyone watching that this was just how things go, that bowing to power was normal, that a worker's pride was a small price to keep a pay packet. We laughed along. We did not ask why it was always the powerful one watching and the weak one bending. Then there was the higher power storyline in 1999. In this story, a series of frightening events happened to Vince's own daughter, Stephanie. She was kidnapped and terrorized on the show. And at the end, the person revealed to be behind it all was Vince himself. He had used the terror of his own daughter to get revenge on Austin. On screen, this showed a man who would sacrifice even his own family for power and for ratings. And the research tells us something even darker behind the scenes. Vince actually proposed a real storyline where Stephanie would become pregnant and he would be revealed on television as the father. Stephanie immediately rejected that idea. She said no. But the fact it was even suggested tells you so much. Here is the point that keeps repeating. Fans were told again and again that it was just entertainment, just a show, just fun, but it kept showing the same thing. Vince's character would use anyone and anything to stay in control. His own workers, his own daughter, nothing was off limits, and we just cheered. Then came a moment that twisted the whole warning around. At WrestleMania 7 in 2001, something strange happened. Austin joined forces with Vince. The man who built his whole name on fighting the evil boss suddenly shook hands with him. The story framed it as Austin selling his soul to the devil, and it did not feel good. It hurt his power as a hero. The crowd did not want Austin to become the very thing he had always fought. They had cheered him because he stood against control. Now he was standing next to it. And that tells us something important. When Austin joined Vince, it did not feel like a victory. It felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal of everything he stood for, because Austin's whole power came from fighting that exact kind of control. The moment he stopped fighting it, a part of what made him special faded. It proved, in a strange way, that the fight was the point. The rebellion was real. Take it away, and the magic dies. The crowd felt it before they could even explain it. They had spent years loving Austin because he was the one man who would not bend. He was their voice. He was the worker who fought back when the rest of us could only dream of it. So when he finally shook the boss's hand, something broke. It was not just a story choice. It felt like the hero giving up. And the fans, who had cheered every stunner and every act of defiance, suddenly did not know what to do with him. You cannot be the symbol of standing up to power while you stand beside it. The two things cannot live together. That is why it did not work, and that is why it mattered. It showed that Austin's real strength was never just his fists. It was his refusal to be owned. But the truest proof that the fight was real came in 2002. By then, the world of wrestling had changed in a huge way. WCW and ECW, the two other big companies, were both gone, bought up and shut down by 2001. That left Vince's company on top, with no real rival in North America. And that changed everything for the workers. With no other big company to go to, wrestlers had fewer choices. If you were unhappy, where could you go? There was nowhere, and that meant Vince held even more power than before. The balance had tipped fully to the boss. Austin was still the biggest draw in the business, the single largest star the industry had ever seen. But even he was not safe. With all that power in his hands, Vince started to treat Austin like a low priority, like someone to be put in his place. And it showed up in the booking. They wanted Austin to lose a match on Raw to a brand new wrestler named Brock Lesnar. Clean, with no build-up at all. A random, unadvertised match, thrown away on regular television. Austin saw this for what it was. He believed it was a waste. A match between Austin and Lesnar could have been a huge event, something people would pay real money to see. Throwing it away on a normal show with no story behind it was, to him, a way of damaging his value and treating him as if he did not matter. So he made a choice. He refused to do it. He walked out of the company. Put yourself in his boots for a moment. You are the biggest star the business has ever seen. You have given this company your body, your health, your whole self. You broke your own neck for them once and kept going. And now, with no other big company left for you to go to, the man at the top decides to throw away one of your biggest possible matches on a quiet night, just to remind you who is in charge. It was not really about one match. It was about power. It was the boss showing the worker that even the biggest name could be made small whenever he felt like it. Austin understood that, and he refused to play along. And this is the key thing. Austin was not playing a rebel anymore. He was being one. The TV feud had always shown a worker standing up to an unfair boss. Now it was happening for real. The man who fought control on screen was now fighting it in his actual life. The story and the truth had become the same thing. So how did the company respond? Did they sit down and and talk about his concerns? Did they try to fix things? No, they did the opposite. Vince and the head of talent relations, a man named Jim Ross, used the company's own show, called WWE Confidential, to attack Austin in public. They spent a whole half-hour episode tearing him down. Vince said Austin had taken his ball and gone home. He called the walkout the single most selfish act in the company's history. Jim Ross piled on too, comparing Austin's exit to a brave film hero suddenly turning into a coward in a big fight. Sit with that for a second. This is one of the central points of the whole story. The same company that made millions of pounds from Austin fighting a bad boss on screen, then turned around and attacked him when he fought a bad boss for real. They loved the rebel when the rebellion was fake and made them money. They buried him the moment the rebellion was true. They used their own media power, their own shows, their own cameras, to damage the name of the very man who had carried them. It showed exactly how the system worked. Step out of line for real, and they will use everything they have to destroy you. And Austin did not just see this danger for himself. He tried to warn others too. In 2008, he gave a direct and urgent warning to a rising star in the company. He told this young performer to leave, to go to Japan, or to another company called Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. Austin could see that this star had run into serious backstage trouble with a powerful group at the top, made up of Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and John Cena. He knew the politics would crush the young man, but the performer did not listen. He stayed, because the money was good and safe, and later, he publicly regretted it, after his career was pushed to the side by the people in charge. Austin had seen it coming. The worker chose security over freedom, and paid the price. But the most chilling warning Austin ever gave behind the scenes was not about careers at all. It was about something far more serious. In June 2007, the company was about to air a special tribute episode of Monday Night Raw for a wrestler named Chris Benoit, who had died along with his wife and child. Before that show aired, a meeting took place backstage. Three of the most respected veterans in the locker room, John Layfield, The Undertaker, and Steve Austin, went to Vince together. They warned him. They told him there was a real chance that Benoit himself had been involved in the deaths of his own family. They were asking him to wait, to be careful, to not honor a man who might have done something terrible. Vince ignored them. He wanted to control the story. He wanted to protect the company's image in that moment. So he went ahead with the tribute anyway, giving Benoit the benefit of the doubt. And then, just hours later, the full and horrific truth came out. It became a public disaster. The very thing those three men warned him about turned out to be real. And here is the pattern you cannot miss. Austin warned Vince when the stakes were not just about a storyline. He warned him when reality itself was on the line. And Vince still trusted his own control of the story more than he trusted the warning from the respected men standing right in front of him. Think about who was in that room. These were not nobody. These were three of the most trusted and respected men in the whole company. Men who had earned the right to be heard. When people like that come to you together and tell you to be careful, you listen, or you should. But Vince did not. His need to control the show, to protect the company image, to keep the story his way, was stronger than his trust in the people who knew best. And that choice blew up in the worst possible way. It is a small window into a much bigger problem. A man who will not listen, even when the wisest people around him are begging him to, is a man who will eventually lead his whole empire into trouble. This was just how Vince operated. He had a deep need to be in charge and a habit of brushing off anything that threatened that control. There is even a small, almost funny example of how strange the atmosphere around him could be. In 2016, a wrestler named Titus O'Neil playfully grabbed Vince's arm during a live ceremony, just a friendly, harmless touch. For that, he was suspended for 60 days. 60 days for a playful grab of the arm. That huge overreaction tells you everything about how unpredictable and volatile the power at the top could be. People around Vince had to walk carefully. They had to watch every move. That fear inside the company is exactly what Austin pointed at in one of his clearest warnings of all. In December 2014, Austin had Vince on his show, the Stone Cold Podcast, broadcast live, and in front of everyone, Austin challenged him. He told Vince that the modern roster, the current group of wrestlers, were scared. He said they were walking on eggshells. He said they feared taking creative risks, because if they failed, they could lose their careers in an instant. And with no other big company to run to, that fear was even worse. There was no safety net. One mistake and you could be gone, with nowhere else to go. This was Austin saying it out loud. He was telling the boss to his face that the system he had built made people afraid. He was saying the fear was real, and the lack of other options made it worse. He was describing a place where talented people were too scared to be themselves. And how did Vince respond? He did not accept any of it. He did not look at his own company. Instead, he blamed the workers. And remember where Austin was when he said it. This was not a quiet chat backstage. This was a live broadcast, with Vince sitting right there and the whole world able to watch. It took real courage to say that to the most powerful man in the business, on his own network, on his own show. Austin was doing the same thing he had always done. He was standing up and telling the truth out loud, even when the boss was right in front of him. The only difference now was that there was no script, no storyline, no pretend. Just one man telling telling another that his company had become a frightening place to work. Vince called the roster millennials. He said they were the problem. He said they did not have the drive to reach for what he called the brass ring, an old phrase meaning to grab the big chance and become a star. He suggested they were lazy and unmotivated. He picked out one wrestler in particular, a man named Cesaro, who was hugely popular with the crowd. Vince claimed Cesaro lacked a certain something, a special factor, the it that makes a star. He even blamed Cesaro's European style and background, and he pointed to a tiny mistake, where Cesaro had once said 4 ropes instead of 3 in a promo, as proof that he was not ready to be a top star. Look closely at that contrast, because it is the heart of everything. Austin saw fear. He saw a system that made people afraid. Vince saw weakness. He saw workers who were simply not good enough. Austin said the company made people scared. Vince said the people themselves were the problem. One man looked at the system. The other man blamed the worker. And this brass ring talk was clever, in a dark way. By telling everyone that failure was a personal weakness, Vince made sure no one could blame the company. If you did not make it, it was your fault, not the fault of a system that controlled every word and every move. That kind of thinking kept everyone insecure and quiet. It turned a power problem into a story about lazy young people. Stardom was no longer about a real bond between a performer and the crowd. It became a permit, handed out only to those who fully gave up control to the people at the top. During that same talk, Vince did offer a rare apology to a wrestler named CM Punk for firing him on his wedding day, calling it just a bad coincidence. But even that did little to hide how completely he controlled the lives of his workers. This is a trick that powerful people use all the time. When something is wrong with the system, they make it sound like something is wrong with you. They flip it around. The company is not scary. You are just weak. The rules are not unfair. You are just not trying hard enough. And it works, because no one wants to admit they have failed. So instead of standing together and saying the system is broken, the workers blame themselves and each other. They keep their heads down. They keep quiet. They keep reaching for that brass ring, even when the game is rigged. Austin saw through it. He named the real problem. Vince just handed the problem back to the workers and called them soft. For years, this was all most people saw. The warnings were there, but they were wrapped up as entertainment or brushed off as just business. Then the world changed, and the warnings turned much darker, because over time, real allegations and public claims began to come out about Vince McMahon and the company. And it is important here to be careful and fair with words. These are things that people have alleged, accused, and claimed. Many have not been proven in the way the research lays them out, so we will treat them as claims and accounts, not as settled fact, except where the research is clear. This part of the story is heavy, and it deserves care. These are real people, talking about real pain. They are not characters in a wrestling show, so we are not going to turn their words into drama or shock. We are going to listen to them the way they should have been listened to all along. Quietly, seriously, with respect. Because the saddest thing about all of these accounts is not just what is in them. It is that so many of them were said years ago, and so few people paid attention at the time. In September 2024, the representatives of a woman named Janelle Grant published a list. It set out a series of specific examples meant to show the company's toxic culture. It was presented as proof of the kind of warnings that had been ignored for decades, and it joined a long line of voices. For many years, different people had said similar things in their own way. They described fear. They described pressure. They described being humiliated, silenced, and controlled. In 2024, Vince McMahon resigned from the parent company, TKO Group Holdings, while facing federal investigations into sex trafficking and assault. And going further back, the claims and accounts pile up. A woman named Rena Mero, who wrestled as Sable, sued the company in 1999. It was a huge lawsuit. She alleged sexual harassment and unsafe working conditions. When a television host named Jay Leno asked her about it, she said the management were making her do things she did not want to do. A woman named Rita Chatterton went on television back in 1992 to make a serious accusation. She accused Vince of raping her in his limousine in 1986. Her warning was ignored at the time, and she was pushed into a settlement. Her account shows how serious claims could be buried and silenced. A wrestler named Ashley Massaro made a deeply disturbing allegation. She said that during a 2006 tour of Kuwait, she was injected with a drug and raped by a man pretending to be an army doctor. And she said that McMahon told her to stay silent about it, to protect the company's valuable relationship with the military. She said she was told to keep quiet. A woman named Francine Meeks claimed that during her time there, she was told by higher-ups that if she wanted to be on television, she should rub oil over her breasts and knock on McMahon's office door to get noticed. She said she was told to sexualize herself just to be seen. A wrestler named Nikki Bella recalled a moment with her sister Brie. After they won a fan-voted award in 2013, she said Vince shouted at them both. The reason, she felt, was that the fans had chosen the winner, not Vince. The organic win had bypassed his control over who got to be a star, and that made him angry. A wrestler named Mercedes Moné chose to walk out of the company. She said she could no longer accept the way Vince spoke down to the female talent. She said she had to stand up for her own humanity. She left rather than be treated that way. Other respected names in the business spoke up too. Bret Hart, a legend of the sport, said the allegations sounded like Vince. He said this kind of thing was everywhere in the company, and he spoke of losing all respect for his former boss. And Ronda Rousey, another major star, made a haunting point. She said that the line between Vince's evil character on television and the real man was almost impossible to see. The slimeball boss on screen and the man accused of so much in real life felt like the same person. Do not let this become just a list of names. Look at the shape of it. For years, in different places, at different times, people kept describing the same kinds of things. Fear, pressure, humiliation, silence, control. Different stories, but the same dark pattern underneath. And every time, the world either did not hear them or did not believe them or chose to look away. That is the part that should stay with us. One voice is easy to ignore. People can say that one person is lying or bitter or after money, but this was not one voice. This was many voices, spread across many years, from people who often did not even know each other, and they kept saying the same kind of thing. When that many people describe the same shape of pain, in the same kind of place, about the same kind of power, you have to stop and ask why. You have to wonder how it went on for so long, and you have to face the hard truth that the warnings were there for anyone willing to hear them. The signs were not hidden. People were shouting. The world just kept the volume down. Now bring it all the way back to Austin. The warning was always there on the television. The boss character was not hiding the power problem. He was showing it to us every single week. The control, the humiliation, the use of people, the need to own everyone and everything. It was all on screen, dressed up as a fun villain. We were watching a man play a monster, while real people were quietly claiming they were being treated like nothing. The show was telling us who he was. We just thought it was a costume. There is one final image that sums up the whole story. At WrestleMania 38 in 2022, Vince was 76 years old, and he stepped back into the physical side of things one more time. He took part in a segment, and Austin gave him a stone-cold stunner, the same move that had thrilled crowds decades before. But this time it was clumsy. It was botched and awkward. Austin later just laughed it off. Some people even joked that maybe it was done badly on purpose. But think about what that moment really showed. Here was a man who once played the untouchable boss, the all-powerful tyrant who controlled everything, and now he looked weaker, older, exposed. The empire was no longer glowing the way it had in the Attitude Era. The grand, scary boss had become an aging man, fumbling a move he could not pull off anymore, trying to recreate a power that was already slipping away. It was a symbol of the whole decline. The towering figure had shrunk. The collapse had already begun, even if we did not fully see it yet. For years, the Mr. McMahon character had felt larger than life. He stood tall. He bullied. He controlled. He made grown men kneel. He seemed like he would always be there at the top, untouchable, forever in charge. But time catches everyone, and at 76, in that ring, the illusion cracked. The big bad boss was just a man now, and not a young one. The same hands that once held all that power could not even land a simple bump cleanly. There is something almost sad about it, and something fitting too. The thing about power built on fear is that it only lasts as long as the fear does. The moment people stop being afraid, the moment the strong man looks weak, the whole picture changes. WrestleMania 38 was that moment made real. The world finally got to see the boss as he truly was, not as the giant he pretended to be. So let me end where I should, on something true and good. Steve Austin gave fans one of the most powerful characters in the history of wrestling. He made people feel strong. He gave them a voice against bad bosses everywhere. When you had a hard day, when your own boss treated you badly, you could watch Austin stand up and fight back. And for a moment, you felt like maybe you could too. That gift was real. That joy was real. He earned every cheer he ever got. He deserves to be celebrated for it. But the sad truth is that the warning was always bigger than a TV feud. The world watched Austin fight Vince every week. The world cheered. The world bought in. But the world did not listen. We treated a real warning as harmless fun. We laughed at the evil boss instead of asking what it might mean. We took something that, looking back, looks like a cry of truth, and we turned it into entertainment and moved on. And maybe that is the hardest lesson of all. The warning was not hidden in some secret place. It was right there on our screens, every single week, in front of millions of us. We did not miss it because it was buried. We missed it because it was dressed up as a show, and a show is easy to enjoy and easy to forget. We wanted to be entertained, so that is all we let ourselves see. The boss was a bad guy in a story, not a sign of something real. The kneeling and the shame and the control were just bits and gimmicks, not a picture of how people were really being treated. We had the truth in our living rooms, and we cheered at it, and then we changed the channel. Austin kept showing us the same thing, over and over, in the ring and out of it, in his character, in his walkout, in his warnings to others, in his questions on that podcast. broadcast. The same message, again and again. A boss with too much power and no one to stop him is a danger to the people under him, he told us. In every way he could, Steve Austin warned us about Vince McMahon. And now, after everything that has come out, it is hard to pretend that he did not. The signs were there the whole time. We just had to be willing to see them. He saw them long before the rest of us were ready to. That is what made him more than a wrestler. That is what made him a warning we should never forget. And the very least we can do now, after all of it, is finally choose to listen.